For more than a century, scientists and adventurers have raced to claim the title of discovering the world's largest dinosaur, each time chasing bones so enormous they sound like legend. Amphicoelias fragilimus, Argentinosaurus, Bruhathkayosaurus, Sauroposeidon. Yet despite bold headlines and record-breaking announcements, almost every giant comes with a catch: vanished fossils, missing sketches, or size estimates that collapse under scrutiny. The stakes are huge. If the stories behind the lost giants are true, our entire understanding of prehistoric life could change overnight. So, is the biggest dinosaur ever discovered just a myth? Or could Earth still be hiding record-shattering giants in plain sight? The answer demands we look closer at the evidence and question everything we think we know about these prehistoric titans. In the late 1870s, the American West became the stage for a contest unlike any other. Edward Drinker Cope and Othniel Charles Marsh, two paleontologists with reputations as sharp as their shovels, locked into a battle for dinosaur supremacy. Every new quarry promised not just bones, but headlines. The pressure to announce the biggest discovery first was relentless. In 1878, Cope's team unearthed a vertebra so large that when word hit the Philadelphia press, the public was told it belonged to the greatest land animal ever to walk the earth. Newspapers ran with phrases like "monster of the ages," and suddenly, size wasn't just a scientific detail, it was newsworthy ammunition in the rivalry. Cope, feeling the heat from Marsh's own string of discoveries, rushed his findings into print. There was no time for careful study or peer review. The bigger the claim, the better the chance to outshine his rival. Marsh fired back with his own announcements, sometimes based on little more than a handful of bones or a promising lead from a field agent. Each man accused the other of exaggeration, but neither slowed down. The public, meanwhile, lapped up every new record breaker, and museums clamored for giants to fill their halls. This atmosphere fueled a cycle of ever larger dinosaurs, each more spectacular than the last, often built from the slimmest evidence. Cope's 1878 announcement of Amphicoelias fragilimus, supposedly measured at over 2 meters tall for a single vertebra, set a new bar for dinosaur grandeur, at least on paper. Marsh responded with his own titans, and soon the scientific journals were filled with sketches, size charts, and wild speculation, sometimes based on nothing more than a few fossil fragments. The rivalry didn't just shape careers, it shaped the very bones that made it into textbooks. In the rush to claim the biggest, paleontologists sometimes overlooked careful documentation or made leaps from a single bone to a full skeleton. The race for dinosaur glory had become a public spectacle, where the true size of a fossil was often less important than the story it could tell. And in this climate, the line between evidence and ambition blurred, leaving a legacy of giant claims and even bigger controversies that still echo through paleontology today. Supersaurus, Sauroposeidon, and Argentinosaurus each hold a place in the dinosaur record books, but for reasons that reveal just how fragile the hunt for giants can be. Supersaurus first made headlines in 1972, when paleontologist Jim Jensen uncovered a neck vertebra in Colorado's Morrison Formation that stretched over 1.3 meters tall. That one bone, BYU 9025, became the foundation for scaling up an entire animal. Later discoveries added a scapula nearly 2.5 meters long, fueling estimates of a dinosaur over 30 meters from nose to tail. Yet for decades, the full skeleton remained elusive, and every new find forced paleontologists to adjust their mental blueprints. The animal's true proportions, long, slender, and unexpectedly lightweight for its length, only came into focus after more bones surfaced in the 2000s. Sauroposeidon's claim to fame is even more extreme. In 1994, a team from the Oklahoma Museum of Natural History unearthed 4 cervical vertebrae, each up to 1.4 meters long. These neck bones are so elongated that, for a time, Sauroposeidon was billed as the tallest dinosaur ever. Its head could have brushed the treetops of a 4-story building. But with only a handful of vertebrae to go on, scientists had to make bold leaps, comparing the fragments to better-known relatives like Brachiosaurus. The result? Body length and mass estimates that swing wildly from one study to the next, depending on which cousin you use as a measuring stick. Argentinosaurus, meanwhile, stands as South America's heavyweight champion, but only by a technicality. Discovered in the Badlands of Patagonia in 1993, its legacy rests on a partial femur, a tibia, some vertebrae, and a chunk of pelvis. The preserved femur fragment alone measures nearly 1.2 meters wide, and the tibia runs 1.55 meters long. Early reconstructions based on these fragments put Argentinosaurus at 35 meters long and up to 75 tons. But with so few bones in hand, every calculation is a best guess, and the error bars stretch wide. Each of these giants, Supersaurus, Sauroposeidon, Argentinosaurus, teaches the same lesson. When the evidence is fragmentary, the story of size is as much about scientific caution as it is about ambition. How much can one bone really tell us about the biggest creatures that ever lived? The answer, it turns out, is both inspiring and humbling. Scaling up a dinosaur from a single fragment is a mathematical gamble, one that's tripped up even the best paleontologists for over a century. In the 19th century, the standard approach was deceptively simple. Measure the biggest bone you had, compare it to a similar bone from a more complete skeleton, and then multiply everything else by the same factor. So, if a femur was twice as long as the reference, every limb, rib, and vertebra was assumed to be twice as big. The logic was straightforward, but the risks were enormous. Take a vertebra from an unknown sauropod, say 1.4 meters tall. Early researchers would match it to a Diplodocus vertebra half that size, then double every measurement from head to tail. The result? A dinosaur that, on paper, could dwarf any known animal, living or extinct. But this shortcut ignored the messy reality of evolution. Not all sauropods shared the same proportions, and a giant neck bone didn't guarantee a matching torso or tail. Sometimes the chosen reference animal wasn't even a close relative, which only multiplied the error. Another pitfall was the reliance on line drawings and field notes instead of direct measurement. A single typo or a poorly rendered sketch could send estimates spiraling. For Amphicoelias fragilimus, a misplaced decimal or a misread unit may have inflated its size by tens of meters, and because the original fossil was lost, there was no way to double-check the math. Modern paleontologists now look back at these early formulas with caution. The equations were elegant, but they assumed a world where every dinosaur followed the same blueprint. In reality, fragment-based scaling is a guessing game with wide margins for error, especially when the only evidence left is a sketch on yellowing paper. This realization set the stage for a new era of scientific skepticism and a push for better, more reproducible methods. If the giants of the past were built on shaky math, what would happen when the numbers finally got an upgrade? A single drawing, yellowed by time and scribbled with hasty measurements, is all that remains of what might have been the largest dinosaur ever found. In 1878, Edward Drinker Cope received a shipment from his field collector, Oromel Lucas, working the quarries near Garden Park, Colorado. Inside was a fragment of vertebra so massive that Cope measured it at over 2 meters tall, an outlier even among giants. The original fossil, described as Amphicoelias fragilimus, was so fragile that it reportedly began to crumble almost as soon as it left the ground. No plaster jacket, no museum catalogue entry, not even a field photograph, just a hand-drawn sketch and a few lines in Cope's notebook. Cope published his findings with the urgency of a man racing the clock. His sketch, printed in the American Naturalist, became the sole reference for a dinosaur that, if real, would have dwarfed every known sauropod. The quarry's precise location vanished with time, and no subsequent expedition has turned up a matching bone. Cope's own field notes, scattered across archives in Philadelphia and New York, offer only hints. A mention of an immense distal end of femur nearby, a rough map, a list of crates shipped east. But the vertebra itself disappeared, either lost to the elements, crushed in transit, or simply disintegrated before it could be stabilized. Later paleontologists like Kenneth Carpenter scoured museum basements and old accession logs, hoping for a mislabeled crate or a forgotten plaster jacket. Nothing surfaced. The only physical record remains Cope's original sketch, with measurements that have sparked more than a century of debate. Some suggest a typographical error inflated the numbers. Others argue that even if the drawing is accurate, scaling up from a single vertebra is a scientific dead end. Without the fossil, every estimate, length, mass, even the dinosaur's true identity, rests on a chain of assumptions and a handful of pencil lines. The legend of Marapunisaurus, as it was later renamed, endures because of this forensic gap. No chain of custody, no specimen to re-examine, and no way to separate fact from ambition. In the hunt for the biggest dinosaurs, sometimes the only thing left to measure is the distance between what was claimed and what can actually be proven. In 1989, deep in the sediment-rich hills of southern India, a field team from the Geological Survey of India, led by Suresh and Yadagiri, uncovered a set of bones so massive that even seasoned paleontologists hesitated. The fragments dug from the Kalamadu Formation in Tamil Nadu included what appeared to be a 2-meter-long femur and a tibia of similar scale. Early reports described the animal as Bruhathkayosaurus, a name that would soon echo through both scientific circles and headline writers as a possible record breaker. But from the start, the chain of custody was anything but secure. The bones were heavily weathered, their surfaces roughened by centuries of monsoon rains and chemical leaching. Field photographs, grainy, sun-washed and few, offered the only visual evidence. The original fossils were boxed up and sent to the GSY's Chennai office, where they were logged but never fully prepared or described in detail. No plaster jackets, no high-resolution scans, no casts sent to major collections overseas, just a handful of field notes and a few published measurements, some of which were later questioned for possible unit conversion errors. As the 1990s passed, interest in Bruhathkayosaurus simmered. Western paleontologists pressed for access, hoping for a chance to verify the anatomy and measurements. But the bones remained in storage, their fate tied to the practical realities of institutional budgets and monsoon season. Then, in the early 2000s, disaster struck. Torrential rains flooded the GSY's storage facility. When the waters receded, the crates containing the Bruhathkayosaurus material had been destroyed, either swept away or reduced to unrecognizable fragments by water and mold. Attempts to recover or salvage the remains yielded nothing. The only surviving traces were those original field photos and a scattering of notes in the GSY archives. Without the fossils, the debate over Bruhathkayosaurus grew even more tangled. Some researchers questioned whether the bones were dinosaurian at all, suggesting they might be petrified wood or even misidentified crocodiliform remains. Others pointed to the scale of the limb fragments as evidence of a true giant, potentially larger than Argentinosaurus or Patagotitan, if the measurements were accurate. But with no specimen to re-examine, every claim became a matter of trust in documentation, not direct evidence. Today, Bruhathkayosaurus stands as a cautionary tale. The promise of a new world record vanished not through fraud or exaggeration, but through a chain of institutional hurdles, environmental risk, and the simple fragility of fossils in a humid climate. The GSI scientists who first uncovered the bones are left with only memories and a few scattered records. Reminders of how easily even the biggest discoveries can slip away, leaving behind only questions and the faint hope that another giant might still be waiting, somewhere beneath the mud. Inside the archives of the Academy of Natural Sciences, a faded ledger still lists the crates Cope's team shipped east from Colorado in 1878, each entry a potential clue. The record for the giant vertebra is brief, just a line among dozens, but it's enough to keep hope alive for archivists and paleontologists alike. Some have spent years combing through these accession logs. cross-referencing numbers in hopes that a mislabeled box or overlooked plaster jacket might still exist in the museum's oldest storage rooms. Occasionally, a new lead surfaces, a crate number that doesn't match any known specimen, a shipment listed as sauropod vertebrae large, or a reference in Lucas's correspondence to a second, unopened box from Garden Park. Yet every search so far has ended with the same result: no sign of the missing giant. Photographic evidence is even scarcer. Only 2 known images from the original Bruhathkayosaurus excavation survive, both field snapshots taken on a borrowed camera in the late 1980s. The negatives, stored in the Geological Survey of India's Chennai office, are now so degraded that details are hard to make out. Still, researchers have scanned and enhanced these photos, hoping to extract measurement scales or anatomical features that could settle the debate. The results are inconclusive. The limb bone in one shot is enormous, but the tape measure is partly obscured and the numbers are inconsistent with the published dimensions. Some suggest a unit conversion error. Others wonder if the bone's orientation was misread in the field. For Sauroposeidon, the surviving paper trail is even thinner. Cope's original sketch, now held at the Academy, remains the only direct documentation. Yet a handful of secondary sources hint at more: Lucas's personal notebooks, rumoured to be in family hands, and a possible field map drawn on oilcloth. Historians have tried to track down these artifacts, contacting descendants and searching private collections, but nothing definitive has surfaced. The same goes for weather records from 1877 to 1878, which might explain whether the original quarry was lost to erosion or flooding. So far, the data only deepen the mystery. Despite these dead ends, archivists and paleontologists continue to probe institutional records, hoping for a breakthrough. Every new scan of a field photograph, every re-examined crate log, is a reminder that the story isn't quite finished. In the hunt for lost giants, paper and negatives are sometimes the only fossils left to study, and even the smallest archival lead can keep the chase alive. Estimating the mass of a dinosaur from a pile of bones sounds straightforward, but the reality is anything but. For over a century, scientists relied on a method called regression scaling. The idea is simple: measure the circumference of the biggest limb bones, usually the femur and humerus, then plug those numbers into an equation based on how modern animals scale up. The Campione and Evans formula, for example, takes the log of the combined limb circumference and spits out a predicted body mass. It's a neat trick, and for animals that look and walk like elephants or rhinos, it works well enough. But for sauropods, the long-necked giants with air-filled bones and body plans unlike anything alive today, regression can go off the rails. The further you stray from living animals, the bigger the error bars get. In some cases, the predicted mass can swing by 20% or more, just depending on which modern species you use as your baseline. That's where volumetric modeling comes in. Instead of guessing from a couple of bones, scientists digitally reconstruct the entire skeleton, then wrap it in a virtual skin, a process called minimum convex hull modeling. The digital model's volume is multiplied by an assumed average tissue density, often around 0.85 kilograms per litre for sauropods, to estimate the animal's mass. This approach allows for tweaking. You can make the belly a little fatter, the neck a bit thinner, or adjust for the extra air sacs that made these dinosaurs so lightweight for their size. The catch? Every choice, how much muscle to add, how to pose the limbs, even how high the animal holds its head affects the final number. Two teams working from the same skeleton can arrive at masses that differ by tens of tons, simply by making different calls on anatomy and posture. The debate between regression and volumetric methods isn't just academic. Take Dreadnoughtus, a titanosaur from Patagonia. Early limb-based estimates put its weight at nearly 60 tons, earning headlines as the heaviest land animal ever. But when researchers built a 3D digital model and ran the numbers, the plausible mass dropped to as low as 27 tons, less than half the original claim. Which figure is right? Most experts now favour the digital approach for these outsized dinosaurs, but the truth is every method has its blind spots. The best estimates bracket a range, not a single number, and the real animal probably fell somewhere in between. That's the analytical toolkit paleontologists now bring to the hunt for lost giants. A mix of equations, digital models, and a healthy dose of humility about what bones alone can and can't tell us. Dreadnoughtus first stormed into the spotlight in 2014 when Kenneth Lacavara's team announced the discovery of an enormous titanosaur skeleton from Argentina's southern Badlands. Early estimates, based on the classic limb bone equations, put its weight at a staggering 59 tons, heavier than a loaded Boeing 737. Headlines blared that this was the heaviest land animal ever measured from decent remains, finally dethroning the fragmentary legends of the past. But as the dust settled, a new generation of paleontologists began to scrutinize the numbers. Gregory Paul, Matt Weddell and Carl Bates, each a specialist in dinosaur biomechanics, took the full suite of Dreadnoughtus measurements and built detailed 3D digital models. Instead of relying on limb circumference alone, they reconstructed the entire skeleton, wrapped it in a digital skin, and tweaked the body outline based on muscle scars, air sacs, and known relatives. The result? The plausible mass of Dreadnoughtus dropped dramatically. Depending on how much flesh you add, the digital model suggested a range of 27 to 38 tons, barely half the original figure. Even the most robust reconstructions couldn't push the number much higher without breaking known anatomical limits. This recalculation didn't just revise the record books, it changed the rules for everyone. Dreadnoughtus became a textbook example of how method matters. Limb-based scaling, while useful for animals built like elephants, just doesn't capture the lightweight, air-filled bodies of sauropods. Volumetric modelling, with all its assumptions laid bare, forces scientists to show their work and bracket uncertainty. As Bates put it, you can't just pick the biggest number and call it a day. You have to show the math and let the evidence speak. The Dreadnoughtus case is now cited in peer-reviewed journals and conference talks as a turning point for transparency in dinosaur science. Full 3D scans of the bones are published online, open to anyone who wants to check the calculations or build their own models. The lesson is clear. In the hunt for giants, the biggest claim isn't always the best one. It's the claim you can reproduce, test, and defend in the light of new evidence that stands the test of time. Peer review now stands as the backbone of credibility in paleontology, especially when the subject is a contender for the title of largest dinosaur. Leading journals and societies have set firm ground rules. Every new claim must come with open access to the data, from bone measurements and photographs to digital 3D models and detailed field notes. It's not enough to publish a set of numbers or a dramatic sketch. Today's researchers are expected to deposit raw scans and model files in public repositories, like Morphosource or Dryad, where anyone can download, scrutinize, and even try to replicate the results. The days of secretive fossil cabinets and unpublished field notebooks are over for high-profile discoveries. For a specimen to be accepted, it must be permanently curated in a recognized public institution, with catalogue numbers and provenance records available for inspection. Reviewers routinely check that these requirements are met before a paper can appear in print. If a fossil is lost, destroyed, or privately held, the claim rarely makes it past the first round. These rules are not just bureaucratic hurdles, they are direct responses to the controversies that once haunted the field. Cases like Argentinosaurus and Bruhathkayosaurus, with their missing bones and disputed measurements, are now used as cautionary tales in ethics seminars and editorial meetings. Modern research teams, especially those working on giants like Dreadnoughtus or Patagotitan, now publish full digital models alongside their papers. The Dreadnoughtus team, for instance, released their entire dataset, bone scans, measurements, and modeling code, to the public, inviting both support and scrutiny from the global community. This level of transparency means that extraordinary size estimates can be checked, recalculated, or even challenged by anyone with the right tools. It's a system designed to anchor authority in evidence, not reputation. The The push for open data and reproducibility has transformed how the biggest claims are made, debated, and accepted. The new standard is simple. If you want your giant to stand tall in the record books, you have to show your work and let the world check your math. For the next generation of dinosaur hunters, this is both a safeguard and an invitation to join a science that's more open, more collaborative, and more accountable than ever before. In the windswept badlands of Patagonia, a new chapter in the hunt for dinosaur giants began with a series of field seasons led by Diego Pol and his team. The site was remote, the logistics daunting. Every crate of stone and bone had to be winched out by hand, then driven over rutted tracks for days. But what they found in 2012 changed the conversation about what science can prove. Instead of a single bone or a handful of fragments, the Patagotitan Majorum site yielded over 150 bones from at least 6 individuals. The vertebrae alone were taller than most people. One femur stretched nearly 2.4 meters, rivaling the length of a small car. For the first time, paleontologists could reconstruct a true giant from a nearly complete skeleton, not just guesswork and scaling tricks. The fieldwork itself was a modern operation. Drones mapped the dig from above, creating 3D models of the quarry before a single bone was moved. CT scanners, shipped in from Buenos Aires, allowed the team to peer inside massive limb bones without damaging them. Every specimen was catalogued, scanned, and digitally archived, ensuring that nothing would be lost to time or transit. When the bones arrived at the Museo Egidio Ferruglio, Pol's team used laser scanners to capture every groove and ridge, feeding the data into computers that could model the dinosaur's body in virtual space. The result? A digital Patagotitan, its length and mass calculated not from guesswork, but from the sum of its actual bones. The numbers, about 37 meters long and 52 tons, were still enormous, but they came with error bars and a clear chain of evidence. For Pol, the breakthrough wasn't just the dinosaur's size, but the process itself. He later said, "We sometimes have more data in a single scan than Cope or Marsh had in a year of fieldwork." Patagotitan's story proved that with enough bones, enough technology, and enough patience, paleontologists could finally anchor their giants in reproducible science. And if one titanosaur could be found this way, it opened the door for even bigger discoveries still waiting in the ground. Every giant has its limits, even in the world of dinosaurs. For sauropods, the ceiling wasn't just a matter of genetics, it was physics, chemistry, and the hard realities of life on ancient Earth. Bones had to bear the weight of dozens of tons, resisting the relentless pull of gravity. Recent studies show that sauropod limb bones, with their dense, pillar-like structure, were operating near the maximum stress tolerable by living tissue. Go much heavier, and the risk of catastrophic failure rises fast. The best estimates suggest that a 50-ton animal was already pushing the boundary, with bone stress models indicating little room for error. But size wasn't only about bones. Growth rings inside sauropod fossils reveal a race against time. Some of the largest species reached adult size in just 35 years, a pace unmatched by any land animal today. That kind of growth demanded vast energy reserves, efficient lungs, and an ecosystem capable of feeding giants. Even the most robust body plan had to balance strength with mobility, and every extra ton required more food, more water, and a bigger home range. Yet, the search for something larger isn't over, because paleontology's map is still full of blank spaces. Remote sensing satellites have begun to scan regions few field teams have ever reached. In Angola, the Atandeka Plateau's ancient sediments light up with the signatures geologists use to spot fossil-rich layers, but political and logistical barriers have kept expeditions at bay. Myanmar's Cretaceous beds too show promise in satellite data, hinting at hidden basins where giant vertebrates might still be entombed. These places are more than dots on a map. They're reminders that the fossil record is patchy and that the biggest dinosaurs might still be waiting just out of reach. If the limits of size are set by biology, the limits of discovery are set by where we look and how far we're willing to go. Patagotitan, confirmed by over 150 fossil bones found since 2014, currently holds the best documented claim to the title of largest dinosaur at an estimated 52 tons. Yet, as shown with Amphicoelias fragilimus and Bruhathkayosaurus, much of the evidence for even greater giants is fragmentary, lost, or destroyed, sometimes leaving only sketches, crate logs, or disputed measurements. Modern technology, from CT scans to 3D modeling, has overturned earlier size estimates, as seen when Dreadnoughtus was reduced from 59 to 30 tons after peer-reviewed recalculation. Despite these advances, no single find has settled the debate. Many sites in regions like Angola and Myanmar remain unexplored, and open data policies now ensure any new discoveries face rigorous scrutiny. The record for the largest dinosaur remains unresolved, driven by both the limitations of the past and the possibilities of the future. As long as new fossils lie hidden, the true maximum size of Earth's giants will continue to inspire research, debate, and discovery.